The What If series continues on Orange and Blue. Today, we are presented by Champ Honda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, and we got a scorcher today because it's what if the Broncos had selected quarterback Justin Fields instead of cornerback Pat Surtain.
Yes, you alluded to it as we were getting ready to record this. D-Mac's dream scenario.
Yes, you would have loved this.
D-Mac wanted Justin Fields very badly. There was a moment on draft night, I believe Mike Kliss, who was right there by where the Broncos were drafting for an interview. Mike Kliss did tweet out that the Broncos were taking Justin Fields.
There were others who did tweet that out as well. Then they quickly deleted that tweet.
A wild draft night because that draft night, of course, started with all the rumors about Aaron Rodgers coming to Denver and whether that might happen. It was a bonkers time to be alive. Anyway,
it was a crazy time. But hey, when Mark Schlereth is texting Aaron Rodgers, because I know Stink gets a lot of grief about that now. Oh, got Aaron Rodgers. Like he was texting with Aaron Rodgers.
Yes.
So he's not going to sit on that night of the draft. It was exciting, and then it was less exciting.
Probably the single most exciting moment, other than when Russell Wilson trade broke last year, probably the single most exciting moment of the post Super Bowl 50 era was those couple of hours when it seemed like Aaron Rodgers might be Denver bound on draft night of 2021, but it didn't happen. And Justin Fields didn't happen as well. Now, one of the interesting things to later come out regarding that came from Yahoo Sports NFL reporter Charles Robinson.
Charles is awesome, by the way.
Yes. And months later, he was diving into why Justin Fields fell as far as he did. And he said, quote, "When I went through Denver, I had a chance to have a really long conversation with someone about Fields. And I said, why? What was the reason? Why did you pass on this guy? And he said, look, it wasn't the talent. He said, we really like the talent a lot. He was like, it was the medical," unquote. Of course, Justin Fields has dealt with epilepsy in the past.
Right.
It was something that was discussed at length leading into the draft. Those epileptic seizures that he's had, they have declined over time. And his specific kind of epilepsy fades into adulthood, typically.
Right. And we remember there were horrible rumors going around, and Dan Orlovsky from ESPN spread them and then apologized the next day. But when I first heard the rumors, like Justin Fields is the last guy at practice, he's the first guy to leave because he uses his epilepsy as a reason to get out of practice. All you had to do was talk to his teammates, which I did. And well, hell, half of them are Broncos now, it seems like. Talk to his coaches, which I did. Immediately squash that rumor. But you still had that out there. And then it became public.
Yeah.
And I've always said on the air, like, I hope the Broncos weren't listening to those rumors. I don't know where they started, Mace, but that was surrounding Fields. And we know, and you and I can have this discussion because we're adults, but as an African-American quarterback, you're getting someone's out there spreading rumors about you, essentially being lazy. I mean, tying and feeding into that narrative about African-American quarterbacks. And it was awful that ESPN ran with those rumors and then the very next day had to apologize.
Yeah, and there was also some crap coming out from Georgia as well through the sources down there. Of course, Fields started off at the University of Georgia, then transferred to Ohio State. And a lot of the crap that was circulating, and I use that word carefully and accurately. Yes, because that's what it was. It was coming from Georgia. It was almost like they felt spurned a little bit, like
scorned lover.
Like, come on, you did fine with Stetson Bennett. I mean, what were you in the over the long haul? And before that, Jake Fromm. What were you guys? What are you complaining about here? You're winning. Who cares? But it's that sort of pettiness that often pervades pre-draft chatter and
anonymous doubt
and the agendas there. That's why you have to be careful what you hear pre-draft. But anyway, so the Broncos don't take Justin Fields. In reality, they take Pat Surtain. He's become an all-pro. You can't argue with how good Surtain is. I don't care what anyone says, D-Mac. It's a very good pick.
Yes.
You found an all-pro at a core position. The core positions basically being QB, blindside protector, edge rusher, CB1. Okay. If you find a star player at one of those core 4 spots, you're happy with it.
Now, I will push back a little bit, Mace, as we have this discussion about Pat Surtain. This is a wild episode, by the way.
Yes.
I will push back because you're saying found. He was a top 10 can't miss pick. So I've always said with George Payton, like the reason I was so upset, I'm going to say their names. The reason I was so upset last year when you didn't draft Tariq Woolen or Isaiah Pacheco, because that's finding guys. That's unearthing gems. With Surtain, I've always felt like, of course he's a, Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber corner.
Wasn't obvious to Carolina, though.
Maybe it should have been.
Should have been, but it wasn't because they took J.C. Horn.
Yeah, that one did not make any sense whatsoever. Surtain was in the bag. Count on it. Book it. Lock it. This dude's a Pro Bowler, and he's played like that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad George Payton made the pick, but I also wanted to throw that in our conversation of like, well, did he find him when he's there, like staring at you like, I am Pat Surtain. I'm amazing.
Well, you had a huge issue at quarterback, and you didn't take a quarterback. And that was the thing there. That was the debate. That is, as good as Pat Surtain was it worth passing up a QB to get that player, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, by the way, you look at the top 13 of the 2021 draft. Can you tell me, of the top 13, how many of those players have already made the Pro Bowl?
I can't tell you.
7.
I was going to guess 10, but
yeah. Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, Pat Surtain, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Slater have all already been Pro Bowlers. This is looking very much like
the
2011 draft. Now, what did the 2011 draft have beyond those Pro Bowlers and potential Hall of Famers there at the top of the draft? It had some QB misses once you got past the guy at the top of the draft, of course, being Cam Newton. Right. And so, of the 6 non-Pro Bowlers as of yet, out of those first 13 picks, 3 of them are quarterbacks: Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, and then the aforementioned Justin Fields.
Yeah, and Fields seems to be on that track now.
That's
currently, we're doing a what if, but this is a large conversation because currently there's a lot of people expecting Justin Fields to take a Jalen Hurts step. Hurts was a much better passer than Fields, in my opinion. So I'm not anticipating that, but you see Chicago adding DJ Moore around him. Like they're trying to, push those passing numbers like you saw with Jalen Hurts taking that step with A.J. Brown there. But if Fields was here, how would the coaching staff look different? How would the offense look? How would everything be different with the quarterback here instead of Pat Surtain?
This is fascinating because let's face it, the thing that could have held him back here would have been the coaching. More Pat Shurmur as OC being the biggest hindrance. If you told me that they drafted Justin Fields and the next move was to dismiss Pat Shurmur, Pencil Pat, and promote Mike Shula, the QB coach, to OC, I would have felt better about Justin Fields.
Right.
Mike Shula, actually, in terms of working with quarterbacks who rely upon the run, especially earlier on in the career, well, Mike Shula played a massive role in developing Cam Newton into an MVP. Mike Shula working with Justin Fields, I have confidence would have gotten Fields where you wanted him to go. But the question is, how much influence would he have had and how much compared to Pat Shurmur being the OC? Shurmur, that's the concern I would have had, because you look at the quarterbacks who have done well with Pat Shurmur, and Justin Fields doesn't really check the same type of boxes, whereas Mike Shula has a track record of success,
right?
With a true dual threat quarterback that Justin Fields is right now. You want to evolve him into a pocket passer, but the success equation early was going to be relying on the dual threat.
Well, now my heart's in a panic because would they still taken Javonte Williams after taking Justin Fields? Because I would love a Fields Javonte backfield. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Maybe
butterfly effect. Would they still do it?
Well, let's look at that draft. Let's
see who the cornerbacks were that were left in the second round. Because remember, they make that move, and that's why those 2 picks were so different and interesting. Because it's like Pat Surtain, George Payton had to ask permission basically to John Elway, and then in the second round they move up for Javonte, and it's like party time.
Now, here's the thing though: like if you look at having Justin Fields, what helps a young QB out. Ground game and protection, right? So I think there's an alternate universe where, yes, they still pick Javonte Williams.
That makes me happy.
Yes. Do we want to live in that alternate universe, or we want to live in an alternate universe where they say, okay, they still needed a cornerback? 44th overall pick, Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky of the Dallas Cowboys. Asante Samuel Jr. going to the Chargers at 47.
Okay.
I can live with Asante Samuel.
I could live with Asante as well.
And honestly, looking back at my grades then, I don't know how similar yours were. I would have been very much on board Asante Samuel Jr. I thought he was going late first round. Yeah. So you're talking late first round corner there in round 2. Would have been fine with that.
So I'm going to ask the question, and not because DMAC is texting me right now. I'm going to ask the question. He's not.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the question, though. Is it better to have Pat Surtain All-Pro? No doubt. I mean, on a Hall of Fame track. I don't want to say that too soon, but that's where he's at. Is it better to have Pat Surtain and a running back who already has been hurt and Javonte? And I love Javonte as my number 1 running back that year over Najee Harris. Is it better to have that? Or is it better to have Justin Fields and Asante Samuel Jr.? It almost seems like the latter is better, honestly. We have to be honest, Mace. You and I are going to. We talk a lot of ball on this show. And if you tell me you can have Justin Fields and Asante Samuel, or you can have Pat Surtain or a running back who's might not ever be the same.
Would you feel better about the team right now?
Yeah.
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 You'd still have more
draft
picks
on the upswing, and we don't know what Russell Wilson has left.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be in the Russell Wilson trade away everything.
I would feel a lot better. Yes.
We honestly should look at this last year's draft. Like, what would they have taken then?
You know what? Maybe they take Charles Cross in the 22 draft.
Yes, and then maybe this year they take Bijan Robinson. Imagine that. Sorry, Mace.
Bloody hell.
But I mean, look at that. Look at what you missed out on because you didn't take Justin Fields because of medical. I hope it wasn't the rumors. I don't think it was. I appreciate all the Broncos
we know
we're
just going by the Charles Robinson
report. Right. So. And going by that report, and if it was medical, it's like, well, be damn that. Because you could have had Justin Fields, Asante Samuel Jr., Charles Cross, and Bijan Robinson.
I mean, I do know it was a concern. Like that I can.
Okay.
I have gathered.
Okay.
I can tell you that it was a concern. But they did like Pat Surtain an awful lot. And we know there's a connection between Surtain and George Payton.
Right.
Going back to when Pat Surtain, the elder, was a Miami Dolphin back in the 2000s. So, it's kind of like when the Dolphins drafted Ted Ginn, as Cam Cameron said, you draft his family. Ted Ginn and his family. Yeah, like great. Are there any members of his family of 4.2 speed?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, if not, I don't really care, that we're getting Ted Ginn's family.
I always thought Ted Ginn got the Devin Hester bump because people were like, we got to get Devin Hester.
Yeah.
Ted Ginn. Like,
well, that was a year after Devin Hester. You're right.
Okay. So
anyway, are the Broncos in a better situation?
They're not
right now.
Not.
But they are in a better situation roster wise if they have Fields,
yes,
Asante Samuel, Bijan Robinson,
Charles
Cross.
Wow.
Yes, you are in a better roster situation. Who's the coach?
Who's the OC or who's the coach?
Well, let's assume that
Vic Fangio.
I'm going to assume this because they traded for Teddy Bridgewater.
Right.
I think the next move would have been to trade Drew Lock for just a couple of kicking tees and a 7th round pick. Whatever you can get. I mean, at that point,
you think I'm mean?
You're not choosy at that point.
Okay,
and
right.
Everyone
you got the guy, but
and everyone everyone knows you have no use for Drew Lock because you just drafted Justin Fields,
and because you have the guy now,
and you have Teddy, and you're
probably going to get a little.
And Teddy is the bridge.
Time.
I think Teddy plays most of that season. I mean, Justin Fields played 10 games as a rookie for the Chicago Bears. Started 10 games, played 12 games. I think if Justin Fields is drafted here because Vic is coaching to save his job, I think Fields plays no more than 4 games. Because I do think the team is still in it.
Yes.
Even if you remove Javonte, Melvin Gordon had a pretty good season that year.
Or you could have got Javonte's teammate Michael Carter, who was a 4th rounder.
Yeah, he goes to the New York Jets. You could have gotten Carter. You could have still had a 1-2 running punch. I don't think that would have suddenly dropped the Broncos all that much.
Not at all.
So basically, I think in this alternate universe, you're probably still looking at a team that when they play Cincinnati in December, that they're 7-6 and talk about the game that was the fork in the road for two franchises. Wow. The Bengals go into that game 7-6. They go on a tear and they go to the Super Bowl. The Broncos lose that game. Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt.
Drew Lock hands the ball to the Bengals defender.
Yes. So let's start there.
Wow.
I think the Broncos finish one game better that year. Okay. And the reason being is I believe that with Justin Fields and the element of surprise,
no film on
and improvisation, that they go to Las Vegas and beat the Raiders. The Raiders did not play a good game that day, which then means the Raiders don't make the playoffs.
Hell, they could have beaten the Bengals if Teddy gets hurt and then Justin Fields comes in instead of Drew Lock.
I'll say this: I have more confidence in Justin Fields on a read option than I do on
1,000%
Drew Lock.
And with a Gordon out there helping him along the way,
I think we're
making D-Mac's argument, but I've never heard D say this.
All right, so
you need to say all of this.
So are we saying that maybe they beat the Bengals?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we're saying they beat the Raiders.
That might be 2 games difference.
You're 9-8.
You're right there.
You just snuck into the playoffs because you beat the Raiders.
Oh my God.
Or maybe no, because I think I'd have to go back and see what the tiebreaker with the Chargers would have been.
I did not think this episode was going to here though, because we're
at that
D-Mac's argument, but not in a just get your quarterback. Everything's a quarterback.
We're saying that they're either in the playoffs or they're in the tiebreaker for the last spot. All of a sudden, Vic Fangio might be your coach the next year.
Yeah.
The question is, but then are you bringing back Pat Shurmur, which comes back to the sort of a point that I made earlier. I think Pat Shurmur's fired. And Mike Shula, who we know has success with dual threat quarterbacks.
And Cam loved him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cam would, if Mike Shula wanted to write an autobiography, Cam would write the foreword.
Yes.
Okay.
For sure.
Mike Shula is your offensive coordinator. And I know you may hear the name not be inspired by that, but you should be because of his work with a dual threat young quarterback and letting him grow. And I think also even learning from some of the mistakes with Cam Newton that doomed him long term. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about 2022. Vic Fangio is still your coach. Mike Shula is your OC. You're coming off a season where you were either losing in the wild card round or you were right there on the cusp.
Just barely missed.
You got your young quarterback of the future. Everybody's excited. But as we saw last year with Justin Fields in Chicago, there can be a great deal of excitement and a great deal of promise and not the results in the win-loss ledger. It was, I refer to it as, on a team-wide basis, a worse version of the Aaron Rodgers 08 season. Aaron Rodgers in 08 with the Green Bay Packers. You figure out this guy's got it, all right? They go 6-10. But nobody felt bad about that.
No.
Chicago had the worst record in football last year, had the #1 overall pick, and nobody is feeling bad about that because they feel like they found their quarterback. And it gave them the freedom to make a deal that sent an embarrassment of draft riches their way and gave them a true wide receiver 1 in the deal they made with the Carolina Panthers because the Panthers knew they needed to get Bryce Young.
Right.
Which is why we're talking today about Chicago, even though they were bad enough to have the #1 pick overall pick last year, feeling, like they can be a dark horse. The question is, let's say the Broncos have that 5-12, 6-11 type of season. Justin Fields is the answer, but Vic Fangio is kind of struggling as the head coach.
Right. Then what do you do?
What do you do? Because you're probably happy with Fields' development under Mike Shula.
Yeah.
I mean, are we even talking about the type of move that Tampa Bay made early in Jameis Winston's tenure, where you're promoting Mike Shula is becoming your head coach? You're moving on from Vic, but you're promoting from within. And you're basically saying, all right, the chips are all on the table with Justin Fields.
So I have to ask, as we
That's
do this,
question.
what if
That's
they
a big
drafted
question.
Justin Fields? And I did not expect this episode to go this way.
This is why
But
it's
this is why
fun.
it's fun.
We these episodes, you and I have no clue where this is going when we start.
No, we just start and we talk.
Yeah.
So I will ask this just because it's interesting, and I pretty much know the answer. Would the team have been worth more?
You mean in like the sale?
You would have had a franchise quarterback.
Oh,
you'd have been more attractive instead of like, I'll get you Russell Wilson. And again, nothing to get Russ, but avoiding the whole, here's the farm and here's Russ. Like, you would have had Fields, you'd have your picks, you'd have your franchise quarterback.
The esteem on Russell Wilson was high at that moment, so I don't think it would have been worth more. I think it would have been worth the same.
Okay.
That's what I thought. I think you would have been talking about $4.65 billion still being the price. Because the more important things on a sale are market, facilities, right? Market actually more than anything. Look at Washington. Their facilities are terrible, both their training facility and their stadium. And Washington is fetching $6 billion plus. So, yeah, I don't think it would have affected the sale of the team in any way, shape, or form.
It affected the jersey sales. There'd be a lot of Fields jerseys out there. You still go to a Broncos game, you see a bunch of Manning, Vaughn, and Philip Lindsay.
He would have the town wrapped around his finger right now. But I don't know if you're looking at Sean Payton being the coach. But then again, we speak of Mike Shula and developing him, and that would matter. But you also have, if it's a frustrating season, new ownership saying we got to make a splash. And
Sean Payton. You could have Sean Payton.
So there's a universe where basically, you could have Sean Payton working with Justin Fields. And I think either way, whether it's Mike Shula, who, like we've said, proven success with dual threat quarterbacks, or Sean Payton, who very much is somebody who will tweak to the style of quarterback that he has, right? We saw him, he tweaked things for Jameis Winston, and Winston looked like he was going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. The way he came out of the blocks in New Orleans, you thought they're going right back to the playoffs, and they're going to push for the Super Bowl here in a couple of years before he had the ACL injury.
That was Winston after the 30 for 30 season. When it was a punchline. Sean Payton made him look good.
Which is why, if things go sideways in the real world for Russell Wilson and the Broncos this year, and they can't do what they want in the draft, don't sleep on the notion of Jameis Winston being somebody the Broncos bring in a year from now. But anyway, Sean Payton will, when he finds somebody he likes, he'll tailor it. I have no doubt that Justin Fields would flourish under Sean Payton because Sean would give him a scheme and tactics to play to his strengths.
And new ownership would want that. They would want that splash.
And they'd have a great offense.
You could have it all Broncos country.
They'd have a great offensive line in front of him. Now, free agency would be interesting because you have Charles Cross. So you didn't need to go get, Mike McGlinchey. Right.
You drafted Bijan Robinson, so you probably don't need Samaje Perine.
And you would have had your first round pick. No, you wouldn't, because you traded for Sean Payton.
You had Sean Payton.
But that's okay because you still had other draft capital. And
oh boy.
And Pat Surtain is still a very good player wherever he is.
Yes, and that's why I feel bad with this conversation, because it's like we have nothing against Pat Surtain. He's great in the community. He's a great young man. He's everything that you want a corner to be.
You're happy with the pick. You can't not be happy with that choice.
Yes.
But there's an alternate universe where you're in a better place. And oh, by the way, George Payton's probably in a more secure spot as well, because he picked the franchise quarterback that Sean Payton's working with and now preparing to have things blossom. I think we would have been talking about a very big year for the Denver Broncos with Sean Payton, with either Sean Payton or Mike Shula as the coach. Maybe let's just say Sean Payton because it's more fun. And your quarterback being Justin Fields. And Asante
be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
This year. Not next year. Not hopefully get Caleb Williams. No. This year. You'd be a Super Bowl contender.
I can't believe I'm about to say these words. D-Mac, you were right.
And with that, we wrap up this special What If edition of Orange and Blue Today, presented by Schomp Honda He's Mace. I'm Cease.